Okay, so I got up, went for my walk, kind of got down on my bed. Was not really especially tired. I'm just like lethargic. Um, anyway, so I recently kind of went to this. So for those of you who don't know, I'm religious and sort of religious. I'm more spiritual, but been kind of diving and learning a bit more about religion. It was interesting because over these last 3 or 4 days, there was a lot of there's like this event where people basically talk about just how to live, be a better person, yada yada, from one particular church that I go to, and it's been interesting because I went to this other church as well, and it was like interesting, kind of contrasting the different cultures and the way they lived, and like the mindsets of the people that I met there, and then seeing like what community like I felt more fully embraced me than the other. And like one of the biggest things I've come to realize is like how vital and central to like how vital and central community is to our belief structure. Like a lot of the times I realize we'll believe something very, like how many people believe something strictly on the merits of what they believe. Like I believe eating and being a vegetarian is good for me, versus just believing it because everybody else does. Like it's crazy how much community really builds out your belief system, and why like you can really believe and live your life according to something but not even really truly believe it or understand it, right? And I'm starting to realize those aren't the same thing, because I realize there's things or belief structures that I can accept and I can even understand them and I can even justify them and argue them, but I myself don't believe them, right? And they're not what I'm personally convicted to or how I choose to run my life or my personal philosophy, right? And just recognizing like how many, like I guess what I would say is like this frequency of like peace is far more fundamental. And I think peace comes less from what you believe and more from what you're willing to not believe, right? Or like a lack thereof. And I think like a lack of peace comes from the fact that we refuse to believe things versus believing something. And I'm realizing that it's when we limit ourselves, and what we're able to accept, that peace like begins to flee from us. Like as we're able to accept and more readily understand more things, peace comes to us more and more because we get a better understanding of maybe how the world works in reality. But I realize sometimes we cling so powerfully to certain beliefs and refuse others. Because I was talking with this bloke the other day, and it was interesting, like I was talking to him kind of how I believe, and he was saying things like, well, I don't agree, and I don't see it that way. And it's interesting, like, how heated he got, and how important it was to him. When it was like, why can't you just accept that I see the world differently? And and that's been my experience. But what's crazy is that instantly started taking my experience and trying to put it through his own lens of his own experience. And I'm like, that's impossible, right? That's like a man trying to tell a woman how she should experience pregnancy. It's like, how can you tell me how I'm supposed to interpret my own experience, right? I experienced it, you didn't, right? But I realized, like, we were having that conversation, and I don't think he realized what he was doing. And, like, we were getting halfway through on it, and eventually it got to this point where I just kind of had to rip down his hypotheticals. And then he got to this point where he was just like, well, this is what I believe. I'm like, exactly. But you realize, like, that's your experience, right? And I don't have the right to qualify your experience, just like you don't have the right to qualify mine. You have the ability to listen to it and understand it, but you can't qualify it or even interpret it. Or you can, but that's got to be understanding that you and I are operating under the same rules, which as human beings is very rarely the case. And so it was really interesting kind of engaging in that discourse and then kind of moving through all these different things and just kind of navigating society as a whole, and me recognizing that I think one of the biggest things, like, in Dharma we're trying to solve the problem of loneliness, but I realize one of the biggest things I think in loneliness is understanding, maybe transcending the fact that I can live and experience and have this different life, but still share that with others. And I think that's the difficulty now, is that so many of our own experiences are our own experiences, and the only way we can bridge that gap is being able to share those experiences, but then have them accepted. And I think that's a problem, is we have to look at ourselves and say, how many of people's experiences are being shared with me? Am I accepting? Because oftentimes we'll look and try and interpret other people's experiences rather than just accepting them. Because when we do that, what we do is we cut ourselves off from them, but internally as well, they cut themselves off from us. And so we have to make sure that that's kind of a two-way street. And so it's been something that I've been thinking about, and recognizing that maybe I have to start accepting other people's experiences as valid, even if I think certain principles or way they think or look at things is like, I just don't, I can't believe it, or I personally can't convict myself to it. But I have to get to this point where I can accept it, and it's like a more refined emotional and mental state. And so yeah, it's definitely a stretch, but something maybe we can build towards. Anyway, that's my thoughts for the day. I think this is day 90, so let's go to it.